We talk about creativity in our culture. We almost always default to this exact same image. Like, it's always the lightning bolt.
Oh, totally. The sudden flash of genius.
Right. We picture it as this totally uncontrollable force of nature. You're just walking down the street, minding your own business, and bam, the muse strikes you.
Yeah, and suddenly you're furiously painting a masterpiece in a drafty garret somewhere.
What?
Or, writing a symphony on the back of a napkin in a diner.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We treat it like magic.
Hmm.
And I mean, the dark side of that myth is that if you aren't standing in the exact right spot with your lightning rod raised, well, too bad for you.
You just aren't one of the quote-unquote creative types.
Yeah, you're a muggle. You're destined to do spreadsheets while the magical people make the art.
Yeah.
But when you really start examining the lives of people who actually sustain a creative life over decades, that lightning bolt metaphor completely falls apart.
It really does. Because we're not looking at weather at all. What we're actually looking at is a river.
A river, I love that.
Yeah, it's a constant flowing stream of energy that is, it's always there, right beneath the surface of the earth, just waiting for us to clear the debris out of the way so it can bubble up.
Which honestly represents an absolute paradigm shift in how we understand human potential.
For sure. It's moving from creativity as this rare external visitation to creativity as an inherent internal lifeblood. I mean, it's the difference between waiting to win the lottery and realizing you already have a trust fund you just haven't claimed yet.
Welcome to the Book Nook. If you are joining our community for the first time, our mission here is entirely dedicated to exploring the most impactful, transformative books in self-help, spirituality, psychology, and personal growth.
We take the texts that have moved the needle for millions of people, and we unpack them, debate them, and figure out how to actually apply them to our messy lives.
And today, we are taking a massive deep dive into a book that has, well, it's fundamentally reshaped how the world understands that underground river of potential. We are exploring the 10th anniversary edition of The Artist's Way, A Spiritual Path to Higher Creativity by Julia Cameron.
And right at the top, I mean, we really need to address the title.
Oh, absolutely, the artist's word.
Yeah, because The Artist's Way instantly alienates a massive segment of the population who hear the word artist and just think, well, I don't paint and I don't write novels, so this deep dive has absolutely nothing to do with me.
Right. And I want to speak directly to you, the listener. Right now, if you are having that exact reaction, I need you to hold on. Because this is not a manual on how to mix watercolors.
Definitely.
It doesn't teach you, like, 3-act screenplay structure. It is a 12-week spiritual workshop aimed at freeing creativity in literally anyone.
Anyone. We are talking about filmmakers and actors, sure, but we are equally talking about homemakers, corporate lawyers, stockbrokers, middle school teachers, parents.
Yeah, anyone with a pulse, basically.
Exactly. The overarching mission of our deep dive today is to unpack Cameron's core tools, demystify these somewhat polarizing spiritual frameworks she uses, and really help you identify and dismantle the invisible psychological blocks that are keeping you from your highest potential, whatever your medium happens to be.
What absolutely hooked me about this material, and what I really want to challenge today, is how Cameron completely flips the starving, suffering artist myth on its head.
Oh, the Van Gogh cutting off his ear trope.
Yes, we have culturally romanticized this idea of the artist as broke, crazy, lonely, promiscuous, and ultimately miserable. We think of Hemingway's tragic end.
We equate pain with depth.
Right, but she proposes instead that creativity is as natural, as healthy, and as vital as breathing. It's not a psychological disease you catch, it is the absolute baseline of human health.
To understand why she frames it that way and why she is so militant about divorcing creativity from suffering, we have to look closely at her origin story.
Because it wasn't pretty.
No, it wasn't. It's the crucible where these ideas were forged, and it's anything but a serene, enlightened awakening. By the time Julia Cameron was 30 years old, she outwardly had everything our culture defines as creative success.
She was a big deal.
Huge. She had an office on the Paramount lot. She was a highly paid working writer, scripting movies and writing for massive national magazines.
But inwardly, her process was a total nightmare. She describes her creativity as functioning in these desperate, agonizing spasms.
Spasms is such a visceral word for it.
Right, it wasn't river. It was a pressure cooker driven entirely by ego, by sheer willpower, and significantly by alcohol. She had fully bought into that cultural myth we just talked about.
She believed that drinking and writing were intrinsically linked, like scotch and soda. typewriter in pain.
The psychology is how she worked during that time is fascinating and honestly incredibly common. She felt like she was constantly playing beat the clock.
Yeah, she would try to hurl herself at the typewriter, desperately trying to get the words onto the page before the alcohol closed in like a dense fog.
Before the window just shut for the day.
Exactly. She viewed writing as a literal crucifixion. She used this incredibly dark language, saying she would fall upon the thorns of prose and bleed onto the page. Every sentence was an agonizing extraction.
Which is just deeply unsustainable. You cannot live your entire life at a level of 10 out of 10 agonizing extraction. And in 1978, the bill comes due. She hits a wall.
A massive wall.
She has this terrifying realization that she has to get sober if she wants to physically survive. But her immediate visceral fear, which keeps so many people locked in destructive patterns, is that sobriety would mean the death of her creativity.
She genuinely believed the alcohol was the fuel.
Yeah, and this exposes the fundamental flaw in the suffering artist paradigm. I mean, what happens when the fuel you rely on to run the engine is the exact same substance that is melting the engine block?
It's a complete paradox. So out of absolute necessity, not out of some lofty virtue, she had to find a completely different mechanism for writing.
Because she just couldn't muscle through it anymore.
Right. She realized that if she kept trying to write through the sheer agonizing force of her own ego without the alcohol to numb the friction, she would fail. She had to learn how to step out of the way.
She describes this transition so beautifully. She goes from thinking of writing as inventing a nuclear bomb.
Which implies all this massive, highly engineered exertion of force.
Exactly. To simply eavesdropping. I love that framing so much. Eavesdropping. She stopped trying to generate the ideas from her own exhausted ego and started acting as a conduit, just sitting there, listening, and writing down what she heard.
Which brings us to the central animating thesis of The Artist's Way. Cameron posits that creativity is our true nature. It is not something we invent, it is something we channel. It is a spiritual transaction.
Okay, let's pause and unpack this.
Yeah.
Because here is where the material gets really challenging for a lot of people.
The S word. Spirituality.
Yeah, and she frames this entirely as a spiritual transaction with the great creator. She uses the word God constantly throughout the text. And I have to push back on this on behalf of a significant portion of our listeners because I can hear the resistance right now.
Oh, the walls are going up.
People are thinking, I am a hardcore atheist. The word God brings up massive religious baggage, trauma, or just intellectual disagreement that I want nothing to do with. So does this mean this entire system is useless to them?
It's a completely valid reaction, and Cameron is extremely self-aware about this exact resistance. She anticipates it. She explicitly states right at the beginning of the book that no specific God concept is necessary to use this system.
Which is a huge relief.
Truly. In fact, she says if the word God is triggering, unhelpful, or brings up a patriarchal, punishing image from childhood, she demands that you substitute it. She suggests using good orderly direction, or flow, or source, or simply the universe.
I found myself processing this through a more mechanical metaphor just to get past my own skepticism.
Yeah.
I thought about it like electricity.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it.
Right, because you do not need to understand the intricate thermodynamic mechanics of the power plant.
Yeah.
And you certainly don't need to worship the power plant to plug a lamp into the wall and read a book.
And you just have to follow the physical laws of how a plug goes into an outlet.
Exactly. The current is there, whether you believe in it or revere it or not.
That is a highly accurate analogy for Cameron's pragmatic approach. She insists over and over that the theory matters far less than the practice. You do not have to believe in the great creator to do the exercise.
You just have to do them.
Yeah, you just have to be willing to experiment. She treats it almost like a scientific hypothesis. By the simple empirical approach of experimentation and observation, just doing the tools and watching what happens to your life, you establish a connection with this flow.
If you clear the pathways in your consciousness, the creative forces will operate through them. The electricity will flow, regardless of the vocabulary you use to describe it.
And what happens when you clear those pathways, and this is what I find so radical, it completely shatters that cultural myth we started with. The trope of the artist as crazy, broke, and unreliable.
Yes, Cameron asserts the exact opposite. Practicing our creativity actually makes us more sane, more sober, and more accountable.
Because refusing to be creative is actually an act of self-will that runs deeply counter to our true nature.
It's like holding your breath.
Exactly like that. When we actively deny our creative impulses because we're scared or we think it's frivolous, that energy doesn't just evaporate, it metastasizes. We become restless, irritable, and discontent.
You start picking fights.
We do. We might turn to addictions, whether that's alcohol or overeating or workaholism or constantly creating drama in our relationships, just to soothe the low-grade anxiety of our unlived creative lives.
But when we finally start creating, we don't need those toxic coping mechanisms anymore because the energy is flowing where it belongs.
Right. But realizing that the ego is the problem and that we need to clear the pathways doesn't actually solve the problem. You can't just think your way out of a creative block.
No, you need a physical mechanism.
You actually need a mechanical process to bypass that ego. Which brings us to the core engine of the book. There are two foundational tools that Cameron says are absolutely non-negotiable for creative recovery.
Okay, let's get into the mechanics. Because if people know one thing about the artist's way,
Yeah.
it is this first tool, the morning pages.
Yes, the infamous morning pages. And they are frequently completely misunderstood.
So what are they specifically? Just to lay it out, morning pages are 3 pages of stream of consciousness writing done longhand, done first thing every single morning.
Strictly 3 pages, strictly longhand.
The resistance to this is usually immediate and fierce.
Oh, people hate it.
Yeah.
And it stems from a misunderstanding of what the pages are for. It is crucial to understand what these pages are not. They are not meant to be art. They are not meant to be, quote-unquote, good writing.
So no one is publishing their morning pages.
Absolutely not. They are an active, aggressive form of meditation designed specifically for busy, restless, highly analytical Westerners who cannot simply sit on a cushion and clear their minds.
Okay, wait, I have to jump in here with a practical objection. Because I felt this immediately when I first encountered the book.
Let's hear it.
Realistically, if I'm a single parent, or I'm commuting an hour to a corporate job, or I have a toddler who wakes up at 6 a.m., writing 3 longhand pages takes roughly 30 to 45 minutes.
It does. It's a time commitment.
Waking up an hour earlier to write down a bunch of nonsense feels borderline irresponsible. It feels like a luxury I just can't afford, especially when sleep deprivation is a real issue. How does she justify this massive time cost?
That is the exact friction everyone hits. But Cameron's counter-argument is that you are already losing that time and energy to the invisible drag of your own subconscious anxiety.
Okay, that's fair.
You aren't writing the next great American novel in those pages. Honestly, mostly you're just whining. You're writing down that you forgot to buy cat food, that your coworkers laugh annoyed you yesterday, that your lower back hurts, that you have a vague, nameless dread about a 2 p.m. meeting.
It sounds so petty.
It is petty. It's petty, repetitive, and often incredibly boring. But by refusing to extract that mental clutter, you carry it with you all day, which slows down your cognitive processing and literally kills your creativity.
Okay, so it's less about generating ideas and more about memory management. I kind of think of it like the RAM in a computer.
I love that. Tell me more.
Well, if you have 50 tabs open in your web browser, right?
Yeah.
Unpaid bills, that weird passive-aggressive email from your boss, anxiety about your car's transmission, your system's processing speed just grinds to an absolute halt. The fan is spinning, the battery is draining, but nothing is loading.
Yes, the beach ball of death is just spinning.
Exactly. Morning pages are a hard reboot. You force quit those background applications by externalizing them onto the paper, so you actually have the RAM available to render a creative thought later in the day.
The RAM metaphor is perfect because it explains why the physical act of writing is necessary. The morning pages act to bypass what Cameron calls the censor.
Ah, the censor. The inner critic.
Right. The censor is that voice in your left brain that tells you your ideas are stupid, that you aren't talented enough, that you should just give up. And the censor thrives on logic and efficiency.
It wants you to be productive.
Exactly. So by forcing yourself to write 3 pages of absolutely unfiltered brain dump by hand, which engages different motor skills and slows your brain down to the speed of your pen, you are essentially outrunning the censor. You give the censor so much banal garbage to process that it gets bored and shuts off.
Wow. And then, beneath the complaints about the cat food, something else starts to bubble up.
Precisely. It's an active emptying out. You transfer your internal static onto the page. And as you keep doing this day after day, week after week, the pages start to perform a kind of spiritual chiropractic.
What do you mean by that?
Well, if your life is fundamentally out of alignment, the pages will relentlessly point it out. You can only complain about the exact same toxic relationship or the exact same unfulfilling, soul-crushing job for so many mornings in a row before the pages start demanding that you actually take action.
The cognitive dissonance just becomes too loud to ignore.
Exactly. They force an undeniable honesty with yourself.
But if the morning pages are the emptying out, the forced quitting of the background apps, we are left depleted, right?
Mhm.
We need a way to fill ourselves back up. And that leads directly to the second non-negotiable pillar, the artist date.
Yes. The artist date is defined as a 2-hour block of time set aside strictly once a week, specifically dedicated to nurturing your inner artist. And there is a massive catch that everyone tries to negotiate their way out of.
It must be a solo play date.
Solo. No partners, no kids, no best friends, just you and your own consciousness.
And people fight this tooth and nail.
They absolutely do. Because being alone with ourselves, engaging in play without a productivity metric, feels incredibly threatening to an adult. The psychology behind the artist date is vital to understand. Art, in whatever form, draws on our inner reservoir of images, sensations, and lived experiences.
So if you aren't putting anything in,
Exactly. Cameron uses the metaphor of a trout pond. If you are constantly outputting, working, producing, problem-solving, giving energy to your spouse, your kids, your boss, you are overfishing your internal pond. Eventually, the pond dries up, the fish are gone, you sit down to create, and there is nothing there but mud.
that is such a stark image. Nothing but mud.
The artist state is the deliberate, scheduled act of restocking the pond.
And it have to be sensory, not just intellectual.
Yeah.
That's a trap a lot of ambitious people fall into, I think. They think an artist date is reading a dense 600-page biography of Abraham Lincoln or watching a 4-hour documentary on the history of Soviet cinema.
Which is just more intellectual output disguised as input. Art is an artist brain pursuit, which means it resides in the realm of the intuitive, the visual, the tactile.
It doesn't want logic.
No, the artist brain doesn't respond to dry intellect or words alone. It responds to magic, delight, and sensory input. Sight, sound, taste, touch.
So an actual artist date might be like going to an aquarium and just watching the jellyfish drift for an hour.
Yes, or going to a giant hardware store.
Hardware stores.
Yeah, just walking down the aisles, looking at all the weird geometric shapes of the screws and smelling the cut lumber, it's finger painting.
Yeah.
Or putting on noise-canceling headphones and listening to a bizarre new ambient album with your eyes closed. Or wandering through a fabric store, touching the velvet, it's play. Pure, unadulterated play.
And for adults in a hyper-capitalist society, play feels dangerous. We feel silly. We feel profound guilt because we aren't doing something productive.
But the imagination at play is the absolute heart of all good work. You cannot produce innovative, deeply resonant work from a place of grim, white-knuckled duty.
So we have these two tools operating as a closed circuit. The morning pages are the transmitter. You are sending your dreams, your anxieties, your petty frustrations out into the universe, clearing the channel.
And the artist state is the receiver. You are actively opening yourself up, taking in new sensory details, tuning the dial to listen for insight and inspiration.
Out and then in. Emptying and then filling.
If you do nothing else but these two practices, if you never read another chapter of the book, Cameron promises your life will begin to shift. The pathways will open.
But, this is a massive but, as those pathways open and the energy starts to flow, we inevitably slam right into the historical, psychological barriers we've placed in our own way.
The river hits the dam.
Exactly. Which forces us to confront one of the most heartbreaking but ultimately illuminating concepts in this entire deep dive. The phenomena of the shadow artist.
Oh, this section. It's rough.
I found this section to be absolutely devastating, honestly. It requires you to look so critically at your life choices. Let's really dig into the blocked self. How often do we see society, or incredibly well-meaning parents, look at a highly creative, sensitive child and systematically steer them toward a sensible career?
It is an epidemic.
Yeah.
It happens constantly, usually out of a misplaced sense of love and protection. The parents know that the life of an artist can be financially precarious. So the child's artistic urges are treated as a cute hobby at best or a dangerous, destabilizing distraction at worst.
The child is repeatedly told to get their head out of the clouds.
Yeah.
Art won't pay the electric bill. You need a fallback plan.
And so, in order to survive the family dynamic and gain the approval that every child craves, these potential artists suppress their true calling. They hide. And they become shadow artists.
And the tragedy is that they don't lose the desire, they just sublimate it. They end up in these parallel careers. Cameron gives some incredibly vivid examples that hit uncomfortably close to home.
Let's talk about Edwin.
Yes, Edwin. Edwin is a millionaire stock trader who is absolutely miserable. He collects art obsessively, his walls are covered in masterpieces, but what he really longs to do is make it himself. But his father bought him a seat on the stock exchange for his 21st birthday, and the sunk cost fallacy kicked in.
He followed the money and the approval.
Exactly. Then there's Erin, a gifted, highly empathetic children's therapist. She's phenomenal at her job, but she's completely suppressing her own art to heal others. She's getting her storytelling secondhand through the trauma and breakthroughs of her patients.
And consider Carolyn, the highly successful photographer's rep. She spends her entire day looking at light, composing shots in her head, and negotiating contracts for other people's images, when she deeply knows she should be the one holding the camera.
Always adjacent to the art, but never making it.
Exactly. Shadow artists almost always gravitate toward careers that run parallel to their true desires. They become editors instead of novelists, talent agents instead of actors, museum curators instead of painters. They hide in the shadows of the spotlight.
Because it's safe. You get the proximity to the art without the terrifying vulnerability of actually putting your own soul on the canvas. If the book you are editing fails, it's the author's failure, not yours. You are protected.
It feels safe, yes, but it breeds a deep, unspoken resentment. What's truly fascinating here is Cameron's assertion about what separates the practicing artist from the shadow artist.
It's not talent, right?
No, it is rarely raw talent. The shadow artist usually has an abundance of talent. What they lack is audacity. They lack the sheer brazen audacity to claim the title of artist. They are terrified of stepping out of the shadows, exposing their fragile dream to the harsh light of reality, and having it judged, mocked, or destroyed.
Because if you try and fail, then what?
Right. The psychological friction of admitting, I have spent 15 years as a corporate lawyer, but I am actually a block screenwriter, triggers a massive identity crisis.
So how do we rescue this shadow artist from that crisis? We have to understand who they really are beneath the professional veneer. And Cameron introduces this core metaphor that is so simple but so profound. Your inner artist is literally a child.
It is not an adult professional, it is a kid.
And like any child, the inner artist requires immense protection, encouragement, and, most importantly, the absolute safety to make mistakes without fear of brutal retribution.
Which we are spectacularly terrible at giving ourselves. Think about how damaging premature criticism is.
It's utterly devastating.
Cameron discusses how academia, or highly competitive, hypercritical environments, can utterly destroy what she calls seedling artists. Imagine a tiny green shoot just breaking through the soil. Instead of giving it water and sunlight, we apply this dark, heavy, unfettered critical power to this embryonic work.
We expect it to be a full-grown oak tree instantly.
Yes. We evaluate a first draft with the same rigorous, punishing metrics we would use to evaluate a Pulitzer Prize winner. It's exactly like screaming at a baby because it falls down while taking its first steps.
I mean, you would never look at a toddler who stumbles and say, well, clearly you're a hack. You lack the fundamental talent for walking. You should probably just give up and crawl forever.
But we do that to ourselves creatively every single day.
Every day. We finally gather the courage to sit down and write a poem for the first time in 10 years, and if it isn't Shakespearean brilliance, immediately our censor swoops in and says, see? I told you. You're a fraud. You can't do this.
Which forces us to ask, how do we protect this artist child while still eventually striving to produce good work? Because we don't want to just finger paint forever.
It's the ultimate paradox of creative recovery. As adults, we demand immediate mastery. We are competent in our day jobs, so we expect to be competent in our art. But if we actually want to become functioning artists, we have to surrender that competence.
We have to give ourselves explicit permission to be bad artists first.
Yes. You have to be willing to write a genuinely terrible, clunky screenplay. You have to paint an ugly, muddy picture.
Because the doing is infinitely more important than the result in the beginning. The creativity resides in the process, not the product. But the adult ego hates the process. The ego is obsessed with the finished, polished product that will garner praise, status, and validation.
And when the ego realizes it's going to take a long time, maybe years, to get genuinely good, to close the gap between your taste and your ability, it throws up the ultimate, seemingly impenetrable roadblock, the age excuse.
Oh, I hear this all the time.
I hear this constantly from people in our community, too. They say, I'd love to learn to play the piano, but do you know how old I will be by the time I'm actually any good at it? Or do you know how old I'll be by the time I finally finish writing a novel?
And Karen delivers a profound, razor-sharp, unarguable counter to that defense mechanism. She says, yes, the same age you will be if you don't.
Boom, mic drop. That is just a gut punch. It strips away all the nonsense. You are going to turn 50 or 60 or 70 regardless of what you do. Time is marching on.
You can't stop the clock.
No. You can either turn 60 having spent the last 10 years joyfully, clumsily learning the piano, or you can turn 60 still harboring that same bitter, unfulfilled wish that you knew how to play. The time passes anyway.
It's an irrefutable logic that forces the ego to surrender. Once you accept that reality, that you have permission to be a beginner and that your age is entirely irrelevant to the pursuit of your own joy, you start to make real progress.
But progress is scary, too.
It is. Cameron warns us that progress brings its own unique set of dangers. The ego doesn't just give up, it gets sneakier. As the river starts flowing, we encounter new traps, saboteurs, and what she calls U-turns.
Okay, let's dissect these saboteurs because they are incredibly insidious. Let's start with the internal ones. The biggest one, the one that so perfectly masquerades as a virtue that we actually brag about it in job interviews, is perfectionism.
Perfectionism is perhaps the most lethal trap because we delude ourselves into thinking we are just maintaining high standards. We think we are being rigorous, professional, and dedicated to excellence.
But Cameron completely redefines perfectionism based on her own harrowing experience. Perfectionism is not about getting it right. It is not about excellence. It is a closed loop.
It's an anxiety loop.
Yes, it is an anxiety-driven, desperate refusal to let yourself move ahead into the unknown. It's obsessively rewriting and fixing the first paragraph of a short story for 6 months. Why? So you never have to face the absolute terror of writing the middle and the end, where you might actually fail.
Exactly. It is a delay tactic. It's an illusion of control. Instead of creating freely, getting a messy draft done, and letting the errors reveal themselves as insights during the revision process later, we get mired in the microscopic details. We lose the forest for the trees because we are terrified of the forest.
And right alongside perfectionism, acting as his partner in crime, is this bizarre phenomenon of the creative U-turn. This is when you ruthlessly sabotage yourself right before or immediately after a significant creative breakthrough.
Cameron uses the analogy of a skittish horse running full speed toward a jump. You are galloping toward a breakthrough. Maybe you finally finish the first draft of your manuscript, or you get a highly encouraging note from a literary agent, or your acting teacher praises your scene in front of the whole class.
You're right there. The jump is right there.
And suddenly, at the last possible second, you pull back hard on the reins. You decide the script is total garbage and delete it. You stop going to the acting class because you suddenly decide the teacher is a hack. You pick a massive, relationship-ending fight with your creative collaborator.
It's so baffling. I have watched brilliant people do this, and I have done it myself. Why do we destroy our own momentum right when we are getting what we claim we want?
We do it because we are terrified of sustained health and productivity. The glare of actual success is blindingly scary, because if you succeed, it means you have to keep showing up.
You have to maintain it.
Exactly, it means the bar is raised. Most importantly, it means you have to let go of the incredibly comforting, low-stakes identity of the blocked, struggling artist.
Because the struggling artist gets sympathy.
They get everyone's sympathy. They get to complain over drinks. A U-turn is a panicked retreat into the familiar, cozy pain of being blocked, because the unknown territory of being a functioning, visible, accountable artist feels far too vulnerable.
It's the sheer terror of having to finally take ourselves seriously. Another internal saboteur she identifies, which has only gotten exponentially worse in the modern era, is the fame drug and the toxic spirit of competition.
Oh, social media has put this on steroids.
Truly, it is so easy to look at the success of others, especially now that we have a 24/7 feed of everyone else's highlight reels, and develop this panic sprint mentality.
The ego demands to be not just good, but first. It wants to be the best. When we constantly look sideways at what other people in our field are doing, we completely lose our own center of gravity. We start trying to reverse engineer their success instead of following our own curiosities.
But true art is about originality. And Cameron points out that the word originality literally just means mapping your own unique origin.
You are the origin of your art.
Yes, you are your own sovereign country. You cannot beat someone else in a foot race if you are supposed to be running entirely different routes through completely different topographies.
Maintaining that internal focus is critical to survival. But the threats aren't just internal. We also have to actively protect ourselves from external saboteurs. Chief among them are a specific type of person Cameron labels the crazy maker.
Oh man,
Yeah.
Crazy makers. I bet everyone listening to this right now immediately pictured a specific person in their life.
They definitely did.
These are those highly charismatic, deeply out-of-control individuals who are basically walking storm centers. They're always in a crisis. They demand constant attention. They break promises. They schedule things and flake at the last minute. They create relentless, exhausting interpersonal drama.
And what's truly uncomfortable here is not just acknowledging that crazy makers exist in the world, but analyzing why blocked creatives consistently attract them and keep them around.
Yeah, why do we let them into our inner circles? Why do we tolerate the chaos?
Because we use them. We are entirely complicit. We use their massive, swirling drama to avoid the quiet terror of our own blank pages and blank canvases.
Wait, really? We use them?
Absolutely. If your best friend is having a massive, tearful meltdown about their disastrous romantic life every single night and needs you on the phone for 3 hours, well, you can't possibly be expected to sit down and do your morning pages or work on your novel, can you? You're being a good friend. You're needed.
Wow. So their chaos is actually our shield. We outsource our distraction to them so we don't have to face our own creative responsibilities.
Yeah.
That requires some brutal boundary setting.
Boundaries are the only defense against a crazy maker. Now, related to external focus, there is an emotion that we almost universally view as a toxic external attack or a deep personal sin, and that is jealousy.
Yes, we feel so deeply ashamed when we feel jealous of another creator. We try to suppress it or we turn it into petty gossiping about them just to cut them down to size.
But Cameron asks us to completely reframe jealousy. She says jealousy is not a sin, it is a diagnostic tool. It is a map.
A map pointing to what exactly?
A map pointing directly to what our inner artist secretly desires to do. Think about it logically. You do not get jealous of someone doing something you have absolutely no interest in.
That makes sense.
If you are secretly a blocked writer, you don't get deeply, bitterly jealous of a brilliant marine biologist who just discovered a new species of squid. You might think it's cool, but it doesn't wound you. You get jealous of the writer who just published the exact kind of messy, honest memoir you are terrified to write.
The jealousy is a flare going up from your subconscious, telling you exactly what you are yearning for.
Once we acknowledge it as a map, we can stop being bitter and start taking actionable steps toward our own terrain.
Okay, but realizing you're jealous is only half the battle.
Yeah.
You can stare at that map all day long, but if your brain is constantly buzzing with notifications, podcasts, news alerts, and everyone else's opinions, you will never hear your own internal GPS telling you how to get there.
Which brings us to the nuclear option.
The tool that honestly terrified me the most in this entire book, reading deprivation.
It is the single most resisted tool in the entire 12-week program, but is arguably the most effective. Cameron challenges the reader to go a full, unbroken week with absolutely no reading, no books, no magazines, no newspapers.
And we have to update this for the modern context because the book was written in the 90s. Today, reading deprivation means no scrolling.
No social media.
No Twitter, no Instagram, no TikTok,
Yeah.
no news feeds, no subreddits, nothing. When I read that, my brain immediately went into fight or flight mode. My sensors started screaming, but I need to stay informed. It's my duty as a citizen. I need input from my work. I will fall behind.
Which perfectly, brilliantly illustrates Cameron's exact point. For most blocked artists, words and media are tiny tranquilizers. We are dealing with an epidemic of dopamine addiction. We gobble up the words, thoughts, curated lives, and opinions of others to avoid having to sit in silence and digest our own thoughts.
It's media sludge. We are so stuffed full of everyone else's content. We have so many other people's voices in our heads that our own inner voice is completely drowned out. We don't even know what we think anymore, only what our feed tells us to think.
By enforcing a strict media fast, by emptying our lives of these constant external distractions, we create a massive psychological vacuum. And nature abhors a vacuum. Into that sudden, deafening, empty space, our own thoughts, our own repressed feelings, and our own buried creative impulses are forcefully pulled to the surface. It acts as an intense purge. It forces the blockages out.
It is terrifying because you are suddenly left entirely alone with yourself. The withdrawal symptoms are real. You will reach for your phone 100 times a day. But if you survive the discomfort, it's profoundly necessary if you want to actually hear what you have to say.
You have to face the silence.
So let's say we do all of this. We commit. We do the morning pages to clear the RAM. We take the weekly artist dates to restock the pond. We banish the crazy makers from our lives. We survive the absolute silence of reading deprivation. How do we sustain this? Because a creative life is a marathon. It's not a 12-week sprint.
That is the crucial question, and it brings us to the final phase of our deep dive, sustaining the creative life over the long haul. And the first harsh reality we have to accept is that a creative life by definition, will involve injuries. If you are in the arena, you are going to get hit.
We are talking about bad reviews, failed projects, a gallery rejecting your entire portfolio, a manuscript you spent 3 years on getting passed on by every publisher.
Just like a professional athlete will inevitably pull a hamstring or sprain an ankle, an artist will suffer blows. But Cameron emphasizes a vital psychological distinction. These artistic losses must be actively, consciously mourned. She compares them to miscarriages.
That is heavy.
It is. If we don't acknowledge the deep, legitimate pain of a rejected project, that grief crystallizes and becomes scar tissue.
And that scar tissue blocks the flow of the river for future work. We put on a brave face. We say, oh, it doesn't matter. It's just business. I don't care. When the reality is we care deeply and we are devastated.
Exactly. Stiff upper lip stoicism is toxic to the artist child. We have to feel the grief, cry over it, talk about it with trusted, safe friends, and then, and only then, use a specific framing tool to move forward. We have to look at the failure and ask, how can this loss serve me?
Finding the gain disguised as loss.
Yes. How does this devastating failure point my work in a new, perhaps more authentic direction? Did that rejection happen because I was trying to please the market instead of telling my own truth? The trick to longevity is learning how to metabolize the pain of failure into combustible energy for the next project.
Another absolutely critical way we sustain ourselves, which feels totally counterintuitive, is through authentic pampering. And to understand this, we have to dismantle a huge cultural misconception. The idea that creativity requires vast wealth, or conversely, that to be a pure, authentic artist, you must suffer in grinding poverty.
Cameron talks about a psychological condition she calls artistic anorexia, which is the chronic, pathological denial of joy and sustenance to oneself. We convince ourselves that if we can't afford a month-long writing retreat in Paris or a $5,000 camera, we can't possibly be inspired, so we just starve our inner artist completely.
But authentic luxury, in the context of the artist's way, isn't about expensive things at all. It's about claiming space and allowing for small, deliberate delights to foster an internal sense of abundance.
It's about permission.
Yes, it's drawing a hard boundary with your family and saying, I'm taking a 10-minute bath, and unless the house is literally on fire, no one is allowed to knock on this door. Or claiming one single windowsill in a cramped apartment and filling it with seashells and rocks that you love just because they are beautiful to you.
It is about demonstrating to your inner artist child through physical actions that they are valued and that there is enough. Enough time, enough space, enough beauty. When we put a stopper on our capacity to receive small joys, we put a stopper on our universal flow of creativity. We have to practice the luxury of time and space, however small those increments might be.
And crucially, we don't have to do any of this alone. This is the final, essential piece of sustaining the work over a lifetime. Community.
We need to definitively debunk the lone cowboy myth of the American artist. We have this highly romanticized image of the stoic, isolated creator living in a cabin in the woods, doing it all by themselves, and riding off into the sunset.
But Cameron says artists actually like other artists. We need each other desperately because the work is hard and the world is largely indifferent.
We need what she calls believing mirrors. These are safe, trusted friends who actively support your creativity, who mirror back your potential and your brilliance when you are inevitably filled with doubt and self-loathing.
To build this, Cameron lays out a practical vision for what she calls sacred circles or creative clusters. These are peer-run, completely non-hierarchical groups where people gather regularly to protect each other's seedling ideas.
The non-hierarchical part is the linchpin. It's not about a master guru teaching a flock of followers. It's about equals holding space for each other. It's a group that explicitly agrees never to criticize early drafts, never to offer unsolicited advice, and to simply champion the sheer audacity it takes to begin.
It is a profound shift from a mindset of cutthroat competition to one of nurturing collaboration. When you realize there is a river of creativity, you realize there is enough water for everyone. You don't have to steal someone else's.
You really don't.
So what does this all mean for you listening to this right now? Why does a deep dive into a book written over 30 years ago still matter so intensely today?
It matters because the core takeaway is eternally universal. Creativity is not a luxury item. It is not an elite club reserved for a chosen few who were born with special lightning rods. It is the natural, healthy, fundamental lifeblood of every single human being.
By utilizing these incredibly simple mechanical tools, waking up a little earlier to dump your anxieties onto the morning pages, carving out 2 hours a week to take your inner artist on a sensory date, You aren't just learning how to paint a better picture or write a better script.
No, you're doing much more than that.
You are actively dismantling the psychological blocks that keep you alienated from yourself. You become a more awake, more honest, more fully realized person.
And who truly benefits from this? Anyone who feels a vague, haunting sense of dissatisfaction in their daily life. Anyone who feels a sharp pang of jealousy when they see someone else boldly creating. Anyone who has put their true, weird, beautiful passions on hold to live a sensible life that leaves them feeling hollow at the end of the day.
If any of that resonates with you, if you feel that restlessness, this is your invitation to start clearing the debris. We are so incredibly glad you joined us for this exploration today. Please remember to subscribe to the Book Nook so you never miss a deep dive into the books that challenge us, comfort us, and ultimately change our lives.
And we want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell us which book you'd like us to explore next. We read every single one.
I want to leave you with a final thought, something to mull over as you go about the rest of your day. Think about the last time you felt a sharp, bitter pang of jealousy towards someone else's accomplishment. What if that wasn't ugliness or bitterness at all? What if that was simply your own neglected inner artist knocking frantically on the door, begging for a play date? What are you going to do this week to finally answer that knock? Remember, the river's always flowing right beneath the surface. You just have to be willing to clear the debris.